blinding the reader. I think if you just lower it a little bit, it'll shoot more downward than. You're good? Welcome to the afternoon joint operational media briefing. First to the podium, I welcome Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava.
Good evening. We're here on the evening of day 14. Our tireless search and rescue teams have continued their efforts throughout the past day, and we're very grateful that the weather has allowed us to continue the work without any further delays. And through these efforts, we have recovered 8 more victims. So the total number of confirmed deaths is now at 54. 33 of those victims have been identified, and 33 next of kin notifications have been made. At this time, 200 people have been accounted for, and 86 people are potentially unaccounted for. So please join me in praying for those we have lost and those we are mourning. As I've continued to stress, the Miami-Dade Police Department is working continuously to follow up and verify all of the accounts that they've received of people who are potentially missing, and to determine whether each person reported was in fact in the building during the collapse. And our detectives simultaneously are working around the clock to identify those victims we have found in order to notify next of kin. It is with deep, profound sadness that this afternoon I'm able to share that we made the extremely difficult decision to transition from Operation Search and Rescue to recovery. It's now been exactly 2 weeks since Champlain Tower South collapsed, and over the last 14 days, you all know that our search and rescue teams from our local community, from around Florida, from around the country, and in fact around the world, have been digging through this collapse. They've used every possible strategy and every piece of technology available to them to find people in the rubble. They've removed over 7 million pounds of concrete and debris from the mound. They've used sonar, cameras, dogs, heavy machinery. They've searched for void spaces, and they've searched for victims. They ran into a building they were told could collapse, and they braved fire, smoke, torrential rain, and strong winds in the hopes of finding people alive. We demolished the standing building in just days in order to be able to expand access to the full collapse site. Our top priority throughout this entire operation, since day one, has been to do everything possible, everything humanly possible, and to explore every single portion of the collapse grid in search of survivors. I could not be prouder of our extraordinary team, the men and women from here at home and from around the world who've given this search everything they have, day in and day out. Men and women whose own lives are driven by a single purpose: to save the lives of others. At this point, we have truly exhausted every option available to us in the search and rescue mission. So today is about beginning the transition to recovery so that we can help to bring closure to the families who've been suffering and waiting for news. Nothing we can do can bring back those we've lost, but we can and we will do everything in our power possible to identify all of the victims and to offer closure to the families in this time of unimaginable grief. To share this news with the families this evening who are still missing their loved ones was devastating. And it's also difficult to share it with all of you. So many who've been watching around the world, who've joined their prayers to ours, who've held out hope as we have hoped in our hearts and in quiet moments for a miracle. We have all asked God for a miracle. So the decision to transition from rescue to recovery is an extremely difficult one, and one that requires an extremely methodical, arduous, and careful process that looks at specific factors. Chief Kaminsky and Assistant Chief Jadala will speak to all of these in more detail. The transition from rescue to recovery will take place at midnight tonight. Our team has developed a very detailed plan to guide the transition and to ensure that the operations proceed at the same speed and intensity. After today's press briefing at 7:15 p.m., we'll be marking this transition with a moment of silence in front of the building site. With our teams of first responders and faith leaders, the first responders will come off the pile and faith leaders will join us. And we're inviting you, as members of the media, to witness this ceremony, not as members of the media, but in your capacity as citizens, to mark this solemn moment of transition. And we hope that you will join us there. To the families, to the president, and to the president who said, when he visited Surfside, we know that no words can ease your pain, but we are with you, we're here for you in all the ways that we possibly can be. We lift you up, and we hold you up, and we hold you dear in our hearts. To my team, you are heroes who walk among us. This community and the world salute you. We will never forget your bravery, your compassion, and your dedication. So to those watching from around the world, thank you for your endless prayers, your donations, and for wrapping us in your love. It is left for us to honor those we have lost by living every day in love. Thank you and God bless. Buenas noches. Aquí estamos en la tarde del día 14. Nuestros equipos de búsqueda y rescate han continuado las operaciones a lo largo del día y hemos recuperado a 8 víctimas más. El número total de muertes confirmados es ahora 54. Se han identificado 33 de esas víctimas. Ahora se contabilizan 200 personas y 86 personas potencialmente desaparecidas. Es con profunda tristeza que esta tarde puedo compartir que hemos tomado la decisión extremadamente difícil de hacer la transición de nuestra operación de búsqueda y rescate a recuperación. Han pasado casi exactamente 2 semanas desde que se derrumbó la Torre Champlain Sur. Durante los últimos 14 días, nuestros equipos cavaron a través del colapso utilizando todas las estrategias posibles y cada pieza de tecnología disponible para ellos. Ellos corrieron hacia un edificio que les dijeron que podía derrumbarse. Lo hicieron a contrafuego, humo, lluvia y vientos, con la esperanza de encontrar personas con vida. Demolimos el edificio en solo unos días para ampliar el acceso al colapso total. Nuestra principal prioridad a lo largo de toda esta operación ha sido hacer todo lo posible y explorar cada parte de los escombros en la búsqueda de sobrevivientes. No podría estar más orgulloso de este extraordinario equipo de hombres y mujeres de aquí en casa y de todo el mundo que le han dado a esta búsqueda todo lo que tienen. Hoy se trata de comenzar la transición de la recuperación para que podamos dar un cierre a las familias que han estado sufriendo y esperando noticias. La transición del rescate a la recuperación a cabo esta noche y nuestro equipo ha desarrollado un plan detallado para garantizar que las operaciones avancen a la misma velocidad y intensidad. Después de esta conferencia, a las 7:15 de la noche, estaremos marcando esta transición con un momento de silencio al frente del escombro, con nuestros equipos de socorristas que van a salir de los escombros y líderes religiosos, y con una transmisión en vivo disponible para las familias. También los invitamos a ustedes, los miembros de las noticias, a unirse a nosotros en este momento, como individuales, no como miembros de la prensa. Para las familias sabemos que no hay palabras que puedan aliviar su dolor, pero estamos contigo y estamos aquí para ti en todas las formas posibles. Para mi equipo, ustedes son héroes. Gracias por su compasión, su servicio a nuestra comunidad, su dedicación. A todos viendo por todo el mundo, gracias por sus oraciones, sus donaciones y por envolvernos en amor. Gracias y Dios los bendiga.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Surfside Mayor Charles Burkett.
Today's news is extremely tough for all of our search and rescue professionals, all of our support staff, and especially me. We've all worked passionately day and night for 2 weeks to save lives. The announcement today comes as a result of a consensus by those closest to the rescue efforts that the possibility of someone still alive is near zero. They are probably right, but in the end, God is still in charge, and while there seems to be no chance of finding life in the rubble, a miracle is still possible. Chief Jadala said earlier that little is going to change in the pace and organization of the operation, and for that I am thankful, as the Chief and I have always promised to ensure that all of our loved ones are pulled from the rubble and reunited with their families. As I've said, today is a heartbreaking day, but I have not lost hope that there could yet be a miracle. Thank you for continuing to pray for the families who have lost their loved ones, and also for those working night and day to reunite those loved ones who are still missing in this catastrophe with their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Chief Alan Kaminsky.
For the past 14 days, our search and rescue teams have worked tirelessly, utilizing all equipment, every resource, and expertise available to find life under the rubble. Crews worked under arduous conditions, through rain, smoke, fire, and even the imminent danger of a secondary collapse. The men and women who arrived here in the early morning hours of June 24th did not anticipate the tragedy that had unfolded. before their eyes. These courageous individuals saw the possibility to save lives at the risk of losing their own and immediately acted. They went into a building and one by one pulled out survivors, followed by search and rescue teams who descended on Collins Avenue to continue the efforts of those first arriving responders. We're now finding ourselves in this juncture where a difficult decision to transition from search and rescue to search and recovery was made. This decision was not an easy one, as our hearts still hoped to find survivors. But our experience and expertise indicated that was no longer possible. We're not going to stop the search and rescue efforts until we exhausted every possibility of finding survivors. This decision was not based on any other reasons except on facts that emerged during the extent of this search and rescue operation, which will be explained in detail by MDFR Assistant Chief of Operations, Ray Jadala. In order to make this decision, the viability of persons trapped in the rubble is an overriding factor and determine when the switch occurs. To determine the viability of life in the rubble, we considered engineering, medical, and other factors. As the fire chief of Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, I'd like to extend my sincerest and heartfelt condolences to the families and friends of the victims and all those affected by this tragic loss. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, along with every other team working on this operation, stands with you in this moment of sorrow and pain, as we hope to find healing and the support of each other in this community.
Thank you, Chief, and for comments in Spanish. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Director of Media and Public Relations, Erica Benitez.
Muy buenas tardes. Durante los últimos 14 días, nuestros equipos de búsqueda y rescate han trabajado sin parar utilizando todos los equipos y recursos y experiencia disponibles para encontrar vida bajo los escombros. Estos rescatistas llegaron aquí la madrugada del 24 de junio, no anticipando la magnitud de este acontecimiento. Estos valientes individuos actuaron de inmediato con el fin de salvar vidas. Ellos ingresaron al edificio y salvaron a 37 personas, y varios equipos de búsqueda y rescate llegaron para continuar esta labor. Ahora nos encontramos en un punto en donde se ha tomado la difícil decisión de pasar de la fase de búsqueda y rescate a la fase de recuperación de cuerpos. Esta decisión no fue fácil de tomar, ya que nuestros corazones todavía esperaban encontrar sobrevivientes, pero nuestra experiencia y conocimientos ahora nos indica que las probabilidades de encontrar vida bajo los escombros ya son imposibles. Nosotros no íbamos a detener los esfuerzos de búsqueda y rescate hasta que agotáramos todas las posibilidades de encontrar sobrevivientes bajo los escombros. Esta decisión se basó en hechos que surgieron durante el transcurso de esta operación de búsqueda y rescate. Gracias.
Thank you, Erica. And Miami-Dade Fire Chief, Assistant Fire Chief of Operations, Ray Jadala.
Good afternoon. As the mayor had mentioned, including the fire chief, one of the most difficult decisions to make out there is the transition from search and rescue to search and recovery. Especially knowing that we have numerous victims that are still trapped in the rubble. We could easily base this decision on emotions, but you just can't do that. And it's based on what we've discussed before. The factors such as engineering factors, medical factors, and of course there's other factors. In addition to that, some facts. These engineering factors include the building collapse itself, the pancake, which is gives you the lowest probability of survivability. Coupled with the fact that it gives you very little voids. This is probably in regards to numerous building collapses that many individuals have attended across the entire country, one that provided the least amount of void available for survivability. These medical factors also include that what we've noticed is the actual medical patients themselves. Once we pull the victim out, what we're recognizing is human remains. Typically an individual has a specific amount of time in regards to lack of food, water, and air. This collapse just doesn't provide any of that sort. I know that many individuals have utilized the past and utilized specifically time as a factor in regards to getting individuals out. And I know that some individuals have even quoted 17 days for an individual that had occurred someplace outside the country. But again, every type of collapse, every type of factor is different. The other factors that we had include the fact that we did not get an alert on a K9, a sensor trip for sound, and any visual utilizing our cameras. The last known alert that we received was the initial hours the day of the collapse. Look, I spoke to the family, and I can just reassure them that just because we transfer to a search and rescue to a search and recovery doesn't necessarily mean that the trucks leave, that everyone leaves and everyone forgets the families. It's not the case, folks. We reassure them. The only thing that changes is just the term. Resources are still there. The men and women are still there. The support is still there. And again, it's just a term. So I ask that everyone just please pray for the families of those that just lost their loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Fire Chief. And our Creole translator, Leonon Leverbourg.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Jeudi a fait 14e jour, 14e après-midi. Côté nous t'ai conduit tout effort de recherche et sauvetage. Mais jeudi a nous capables de rapporter après-midi que nous avons 8 décès encore que nous capables de signaler. Et ça a porté quantité de décès à 54, et 33 que nous avons identifiés. Il y a 200 personnes que nous avons trouvées qui sont encore vivants et il y a des gens que nous avons trouvés qui sont 86. L'équipe nous a toujours travaillé pour nettoyer l'ISA pour sûr que tout le monde que nous dit nous ne pouvons pas trouver, c'est des gens qui étaient effectivement dans le building là, leur tombé. C'est avec un pile peine que nous allons dire que nous prenons une décision qui est assez difficile. Décision pour nous passer de période de recherche avec sauvetage, pour nous passer à période de recherche avec récupération. Nous faisons toute recherche qui était possible, nous cherchons voie. Nous travaillons en bas du feu, nous travaillons en bas de la fumée, nous travaillons en bas de la pluie, nous travaillons en bas vent. Mais nous allons arriver à sauver le monde jusqu'au nia. Toute priorité, nous, c'était pour sauver la vie. À 7 heures à soir, nous allons aller passer sur ce site-là pour nous faire un moment de transition et de silence. Nous sommes capables de dire que nous sommes fiers de l'équipe noire parce que le travail, c'était sauver la vie et on a cherché toute option possible pour sauver la vie. La famille, nous voulons dire, nous n'avons pas de mots pour nous dire, seulement nous sommes capables de dire, nous avec vous. L'équipe noire, nous sommes capables de dire que nous sommes de vrais héros. Nous faisons tout ça, nous sommes capables et nous ne pouvons jamais oublier ça fait. Nous ne pouvons jamais oublier bravo nous et nous ne pouvons jamais oublier service nous. À tout le monde, nous disons parole ça. Merci en pile pour prier nous. Merci en pile pour don que nous faisons. Merci en pile pour l'amour.
Thank you, Mr. Leverbourg. We also have here Deputy Incident Commander Charles Cyril and Miami-Dade Police Department Director Freddie Ramirez to also answer questions. We'll begin the questions and answer session. Sir?
Chief, so sorry for all of you, but today, a third of the victims that we found in the last 24 hours. I can't imagine what the teams are going through. Obviously, the families speaks for itself, but the pace in finding the bodies, how are your teams doing, how they holding up?
Well, it's devastating for all of us. You know, all our hearts are sorrow. We're here. You know, we know what our goal was all along, and we'll continue moving forward to try to locate everyone's loved ones in closure. So our spirits will continue moving forward to do the job that we need to do.
Ma'am, over here in the morning.
This is for the chief nurses and chief. A lot of families have talked about the hope that they had for those voids. And there was one of the daughters, Don Cohen's daughters, 12 girls, had mentioned how she thought that there was voids maybe in the tents. Could you speak to what voids existed and what needs to be done?
All right, so the question in regards to the voids. So in regards to the voids, the way that they're created when there's a collapse, it's typically a wall or a floor collapses and the version of the collapse. So if a wall were to fall and land on another wall, it would create somewhat of a void or a pocket space that equals a triangle, a large triangle. Floors that collapse in the middle create somewhat of a W with two large voids. Where pancake collapses, unfortunately, is a floor or a wall on top of a floor, on top of a floor, on top of a floor. And I understand in regards to the individual that you're mentioning, and if there's anybody that knows the family, it's me. 14 days of it. One of the things that we made sure and we reinforced day in and day out is the information, which is unprecedented. And again, it's the support of the men and women that you see behind you, or behind me, my apologies. We showed them pictures, up-to-date pictures, videos. We brought them to the site early into the incident, so when they had a hard time understanding or comprehending, they saw the floors on the north side, where we had 4 floors, and the separation between the 4 floors was a total of 3 feet. Now remember, each floor, each space is about 10 feet between the ceiling and a floor. And here they basically saw 4 floors on top of each other with a void of basically a couple of feet. 14 days of looking for voids, that's what we've been doing. Initially it was looking for victims, that were trapped, and then it kind of shifted to, God, give us at least a large enough void to find a victim. And, we just couldn't. And today, after really harping on the staircase on the east side and the voids, what we believe where the building collapsed on the east-west side, there was no voids. I mean, it was unprecedented in regards to the lack of void for survivability. And I'm sure many of you saw the video of how the building came down. I mean, it's just the sheer shock, the stress, and the weight of that building.
How do you get a question?
What triggers the change from search and rescue to this recovery? Because you have been saying you will be search and rescue until the last victim was found.
Yes. So the question is what's the...
So you have been saying the search and rescue mission will be until the last victim is found.
Right.
So what's the change?
All right, so let me make some corrections. The search and rescue was specifically for live victims to be found. And today, after all the facts, all the factors, we've decided, based on everything that's been given to us, that there are no live victims. So what we've done now is transfer to a search and recovery. And the search and recovery is now shifted to finding every victim in that pile. So that's the difference between the search and rescue and the search and recovery.
What is happening to the...
What is what?
What is happening to the non-identifiable human remaining? And what are you doing to ensure that everything in that rubble pile is... Then how do you get started?
All right, so I'm going to defer that to the Miami-Dade Police Department Director.
Thank you. Our homicide detectives, our crime scene investigators have been from day one working hand in hand with our fire rescue personnel and our medical examiner's office. Our clergy, our rabbis, everybody's been in there. Every bit of our family members count and matter. And we take every effort, every possible means to ensure that we recover family members and return them to their families. That's what we're doing. We will continue to do in the recovery phase. Nothing's going to change. The same hard-working, dedicated people will be there until everyone's returned to their loved ones.
Where are the trucks of trouble going? Where are they going?
They're going to our evidence collection site. With our partners in NIST and our homicide detectives, our engineers that are on the scene, they're tagging relevant information, data, evidence, collating it and transporting it to a site for later analysis as we move forward. Right now, our primary focus is to recover family members. Thank you.
Sure, what is the reaction from families?
So the reactions of the families, I'm not going to go into too much detail because obviously it's personal, but I can assure you the one thing is it wasn't a surprise in regards to everything that we've provided them since day one. And again, it's just the amount of video, pictures, information twice a day. Each day or each session ranges between 2 to 3 hours. Questions and answers. Let's just say that there's definitely grief, but it wasn't a surprise.
Over here, sir, followed by the meeting.
Now that you are going to be in recovery mode, what does that mean as far as the pace of the work that you're doing? Are you going to be bringing in more machinery, for example, to scoop up more of the debris? I mean, how is that going to change the operations?
Right. So in regards to the recovery itself, as the Madam Mayor had mentioned, nothing really changes in regards to that aspect. So the pace remains the same. Night and day operations. The personnel are remaining, and we may be shifting them out for relief because, as you see it on their face, you see it on their uniform, you see it in the way that they come off the pile. They're mentally exhausted. They're emotionally exhausted, just as all of us. But in regards to that, the pace continues. The resources remain, but we may just alter the personnel, alter the types of trucks. But
can you be more aggressive now?
Well, again, in terms of aggressiveness, we've maintained aggressiveness up to a level of not damaging the body. Because at this point, we are transferring over to a recovery. So initially, our concern was accidentally killing a victim, where in this case, we don't want to damage a body. Of course, we want to, locate the bodies in whole and provide closure to the family.
Sorry.
Over here in black.
With these decisions.
Over here in black.
Okay.
About the families, were they able to visit today? Were they able to visit the site today?
Survivors.
No, the ones that visited today were the survivors, not the families, the victims of the families.
And what was their reaction?
So these are people who've lost all their belongings, their work, their work materials, their personal keepsakes, their investment, and of course they've been trying to understand how they can recover those losses. They went there for closure, just like the families, and what they realized is how fortunate they were to be alive, to have been rescued from that building.
So the gentleman in black over here finished off the mission.
Question to Mayor Collins, more brain. What do you hope happens next? One suggestion for memorial.
So people are starting to think and talk about that land. It's very premature to say exactly. But yes, I certainly hope that we can make a way to memorialize this tragedy.
The question is for the chief or assistant chief. Now that you've been able to better assess the wreckage, we've heard that because of the collapse, how violent it was, there are a lot of first stories that are actually underground. How long will it take for for you guys how much longer to get to the bottom?
We don't have an exact time frame established. We'll develop plans and our strategies and continue moving forward. We do feel we're several weeks in regards to this operation, but we're going to continue doing, everything we can to find everyone's loved one.
You get one Spanish question.
¿Cuál es la diferencia entre la fase que hoy arranca de recovery y
Bueno, en realidad en cuanto a cuestión de operación, la diferencia es mínima. Tenemos todavía la misma maquinaria, los mismos recursos, la misma cantidad de personal disponible trabajando aquí. Lo que vamos a ver es en cuestión a la maquinaria, al personal que van a seguir trabajando las 24 horas al día. No vamos a estar buscando personas vivas, utilizando los perros que están buscando las personas vivas, ni tampoco estos equipos de sonido que hemos estado utilizando anteriormente para tratar de escuchar voces o ruidos o sonidos que estén haciendo posibles víctimas que estén atrapadas. En realidad lo que queremos que entiendan las personas es que en este momento, aunque se ha cambiado a esta fase, todos esos recursos siguen en pie y siguen aquí para trabajar en la misión de ahora recuperar estas personas para entregarlas a sus familiares.
Yes, in Spanish, please. Probablemente lo manejaron antes, no lo tengo claro. Con esta decisión, ¿cuál es el número final de víctimas producto de este colapso?
Ahora estamos en 54 víctimas. Tenemos las víctimas que no hemos encontrado. Mientras que seguimos en este proceso, los números van a cambiar. Pero por ahora no te puedo decir exacto cuánto es el total. Los detectives de lo que se dice los missing persons están trabajando para lo que no hemos encontrado. Y los detectives de homicidio, el Medical Examiner's Office, todo el mundo estamos trabajando juntos, recuperando víctimas, y mientras que movemos en este proceso, los números van a cambiar. Pero no puedo decir que es el total todavía, lo que te puedo decir es lo que tenemos ahora.
Dentro de esos 54 casos,
Sí.
¿está el caso de la señora que sacaron con vida y falleció después o no? Porque
Sí.
es un dato que está...
Sí, el que falleció en el hospital es también en ese número del 54. Sí.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate it.
Mayor Burnett.
If I have the attention of the members of the media,